let's do it like this and say, did Peter know what the vision meant? And again, I'm asking you here as you're reading through the story. As you read through the story and the vision comes to him and he even goes downstairs, does he know what the vision means? No, he doesn't, right? Because it says he was still puzzling over the vision. He did not say, oh, this means I can eat pork, right? He got the vision and couldn't figure it out, and then the men show up. Remember that? And then finally, well, how do you? The only way we know is by the way Luke tells us what the vision means. Why didn't Peter just eat the clean animals? Easy answer, because they were mixed up with the unclean animals, right? Did he actually eat pork? No, there's nothing in the context that in the story that would ever tell you that. And if he did, it would be very easy for Luke to say so. Luke could have just said, and Peter had his first sausage pizza, and he really loved it. It was unusual, and he liked it. Okay, doesn't say that. What does Luke say the vision means? Now, when I put that in quotation marks, I hope you understand what that means. What I'm saying is, what is the very first time where the vision, the meaning of the vision, actually is expressed? Now, this is kind of important, so I'm not going to give it to you. You're going to have to tell me. What is the very first time where the meaning of the vision is actually expressed? Parker? No, it's actually a little bit before that. Erica? When he enters Cornelius' house and he says, now I know that I should not call any man unclean. Okay? So there's the very first time he expresses it. Up to that point, he hasn't quite figured it out until he actually gets to the people, and then he realizes, oh, it's the mixing up thing. I shouldn't call any man unclean, right? So that's where he actually says it, and it's explicit in the story. Does Luke make a big deal about Cornelius' conversion? And we talked about this already, right? So the answer is no, he doesn't. It's actually the conversion part is fairly ambiguous. And in fact, sometimes I still refer to it as the conversion story just because I got used to talking about it that way. But again, Gentiles got saved all the time. This is not a big deal. We always know they can be saved. What is so amazing this time, of course, is that he gets the Spirit, and now he's totally first class, and the gap has been erased between first class and second class. So what did the tongues mean? When they begin to speak in tongues, again, very simple, it just means what? But they have the Spirit, right? The Spirit is there to indwell in them. To what do the men from Jerusalem object in chapter 11, verse 3? Peter, we can't believe this. You did what? You entered the house. You did that. And you ate with them. Right? And so that, again, shows you, again, what their focus is. And then finally, how does 11:18 fit with the message of the book? And that's just the very last. That is just the conclusion of that little conference there. And who can tell me what it does? How does that fit with the message of the book? Or what, as you're moving through the book of Acts, what does that tell you where we are about what's just happened? I'm sorry if that sounds vague, but try not to give it away too much here. So now we see that God has granted the Gentiles repentance that leads to life, right? So at this point, it fits in the book because now Gentiles are included in the bandwagon, but it doesn't say anything about Jewishness. And that's all I'm trying to get across here, okay? All right. Any leftover questions you didn't get a chance to ask about this? Or are you happy? You happy? You guys aren't going to be quiet like this all day long, are you? Because it's going to be really boring if I'm the only one talking. All right. Okay, then let's get on here. Now, here you'll notice what I want to do today is, we've already done way over 10 minutes of group work, 35 minutes of classwork. What I mean by that is just working through the questions, and I don't think it'll take us that long because I think they're fairly self-explanatory. And then we've got 20 minutes of Q&A at the end just to talk about whatever you want to, because we've kind of reached a certain level here, so it's time to pause and reflect a little bit. So if you got questions you're thinking about through here, you don't want to interrupt class, that's okay, but make sure you get them ready for this time, okay? All right, then let's get right to it and answer this one. For whose benefit was the council held? Oh my goodness, was it ever Gentiles? Now look at this, 15, 1, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 19, 23, and then chapter 21, verses 21 and 25. Now I say that because, again, you look in typical commentaries, people just gloss right over this. But as you begin to look at the text here, and I just want to do it to belabor the point a little bit, 15:1, it doesn't actually say Gentiles, but obviously if we're trying to get them circumcised, by definition they are Gentiles, right? Because if you're a Jew, this happened to you when you're 8 days old. Right? So the whole thing down here then, 15, now I don't have the, I guess I should turn this around, I can see it. 15:1, 15:7, let me go to 15:7. Again, there's Gentiles, 15:8, 15:9. It doesn't say Gentiles, but it does say he made no distinction between them and us. Clearly, Jew and Gentile thing going on here. And then where else do we go there? 14 and 19. Yeah, Gentiles for his name. And 19. Therefore, I conclude that we should not cause extra difficulty for those among the Gentiles. Now, let me keep going here. And notice when, after they have finished their conference, they actually compose this letter. And so look how they start the letter here. From the apostles and elders, your brothers, to the Gentile brothers and sisters in Antioch, Syria, and Cilicia. So we are sending this message to Gentiles alone, not to Hebrews, okay? And then notice, I'm going to go on here a little bit further. When we get ready to go on the second missionary journey in chapter 16, notice what Paul does here. As they, I'm reading 16:4, as they went through the towns, they passed on the decrees that had been decided on by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem for the Gentile believers to obey. So again, you really have to work hard to miss that. I guess that's the end. That's as far as I'm going. I thought I could get to chapter 21, but I can't get to chapter 21. I don't guess. That's 9 to 15. Let me see if 21's in here. Oh, there's 21. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Nope, I'm still not going to make it. Forget it. We'll just go back. But anyway, in Acts 21, it's the whole story of speaking to those Jewish people who are zealous for the law. And it says, as for the Gentiles, we already told them and wrapped that matter up and distinguishing it between them and the Jews. Okay. All right, then let me put this text back up, and let's go on to the next question. Did the council convene to answer the question how they're saved, or how to live after salvation, or both, or D, none of the above, just to make it really fun? And the right answer is C. Yeah, briefly explain your answer number 2, hopefully citing references from Acts 15. And it is C. It's both because of what? Well, some were to get saved, others were after, and those in 15:1-4 think it is necessary for salvation, and those in 15:5 think it's appropriate for afterwards. Now, I hope that makes sense to you, because as you take a look at 15:1-5, right there, you see circumcision in 15:1, and you see circumcision in 15:5. Now, do you remember why I said those were 2 very different cases? What as you look at that, what do you see up there on the screen that makes you think those are 2 different cases?
Well, the first one is before they're saved, so they're asking if it's necessary, if it's basically salvific. And then the second one, they're discussing if they should be able to, or if they would have to observe the law after they were saved, which is a part of circumcision, is a part of the law.
Yeah.
So it's like the before and after.
Yeah, you're perfect. You perfectly described it. Now, what is there up there on the screen that makes you think that what you just said is true? If you hadn't read it, that I told you that. What are the clues up there on the screen?
Like that you cannot be saved.
Yes. Yep, exactly. That's certainly part of it. You can't be saved, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. And then look at the response. When Paul and Barnabas had a major argument and debate with them, right, they decided to go up to the council. But obviously, Paul and Barnabas say, no, this can't be right. That's not true at all, right? And so then they do, and the rest of that is going up there to Jerusalem, and they get up there in verse 4. When they arrived, they were received. And then there's another situation here in 15:5. Now, why would I say this is a different situation? Read the text closely. Pharisees bringing it up. Yeah, that's one of the first words you go to. So you think, oh, Pharisees, those overzealous Jews too. But read even more carefully. Yeah, even more carefully. Yeah. I'll go back and just for fun, because I like to do this. It's one of my favorite things to do. See that? Look at this. This is great. This is just great. They had believed. You see? So what you're looking at here is you say they're Pharisees, but again, you got to get out of your head that Pharisees are bad guys. A lot of them are, a lot of them aren't, right? You can even name some bad ones and some good ones. Name a good Pharisee for me. Yeah, Nicodemus is a good Pharisee, right? He's one who believes, right? So just because you're a Pharisee doesn't mean that you're a bad guy. It means you have a certain set of doctrinal standards. Sometimes you keep those things because you're just really zealous and you trust God and you're really careful. Other times you think, oh, if I do this, I'm going to work my way to heaven. Now, you can't necessarily tell what the motive is in the heart, but that makes all the difference here. And so as you look at these Pharisees had believed, so they understand how to get saved. Right? So we don't think that these Pharisees down here in Jerusalem are trying to get the Gentiles to do this in order to get saved, but rather saying, okay, after they're already saved by faith in Messiah, now they need to become Jewish. All right? That make sense? You guys all with me there? All right. Okay. Then let's go on to question, whatever the next question is. Let's illustrate it like this and say, keep this distinction in your mind. The people in 1 to 4 were saying law is necessary for admission, and the law is necessary for full admission. Now, besides the fact that I think those two distinctions are there between 1 to 4 and 5, why else do I make a big deal about putting this thing up on the screen where you can see it and put those in two separate boxes? Why don't we do that? Why am I making two issues out of this? And I'm trying to lead you on to the next section. Dahlia? Yeah, because then two different people deal with it, right? Peter deals with one part of the issue, and James deals with the other one. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at their answers here then. Which one does Peter answer, and what is his answer? And the answer is the first one. Is it necessary for salvation? Now, let me stop here for a second and say this. He's not saying the law is no longer necessary for salvation. Did you catch this part of it? He's not saying that at all. What actually is Peter saying? Okay, doesn't influence it one way or the other. Can you be more specific? It was never necessary for salvation. Again, make sure you get that urban legend urban myth out of your head. Just because some Pharisees thought that doesn't mean God intended that. Doesn't mean good Jewish people all the way down through the line thought that. Moses didn't think that. Aaron didn't think that. David didn't think that. Right? Jesus didn't think that. Paul did think that before, but not afterwards. Okay. He's not saying the law is no longer necessary for salvation. What he's saying is it was never been necessary for salvation. So when he starts saying it's a yoke we could never bear, he's not trying to say, oh, this law was such a horrible thing, we could never do it. No, what he's saying is, if someone tries to keep the law for their salvation, that's a yoke which you cannot bear. Right? But the rest of it was simply a wonderful expression of your faith in Messiah, and the redemption and the sacrifices were a wonderful thing to look forward to. Right? To think otherwise is almost imagining a Christian today who would go to to communion at church or watch a baptism at church and say, oh, I just hate going through these things. It's so awful. It's so tedious. It's just so, I just don't like it, right? I mean, you would say, well, if your attitude is like that, you probably don't really appreciate what's going on here. I mean, if you really love Jesus and you really realize that you're a sinner who was totally lost and it's only by his blood, this is a really wonderful time to sit through communion and to think through the body and the blood that were broken for us. Right? It's a special time. So, it's never been necessary for salvation. It's certainly what he's saying. No one, not even Jews, has ever been able to keep the law for salvation. Salvation is by grace through faith, as it has been since Genesis 3:15 to 21. Let me stop there just for a second. You know what I'm talking about there, right? Genesis 3:15, there's a seed who's going to come. And then God tells Adam he's going to die. And Adam says, okay, I'm going to die, but I'm going to name my wife Life Giver because I believe this promise that through her will come a seed who will bring back life to us. And then God responds by covering his nakedness with the blood of an innocent substitute, right? So the whole salvation by grace in trust in God's promises for a deliverer is right there. And that's the way it's always been, Old Testament and New. Okay? So anybody who thinks otherwise, namely the guys in 15:1-4, have serious soteriological issues, and that's why they ought to be separated from the guys in 15:5. You'll notice that it says, and you go back to the text over there, notice that it says they had a sharp disagreement with them, a major argument, it says in this text, a major argument here with these guys, but it wasn't such a major argument with the people down in 15:5. Now, it was still an argument, but not the same kind, right? Because if you look at those two, I think we can obviously agree that the first one is the worst, right? You have to keep the law to be saved. Come on, that's bad no matter where you are or who you are, okay? So, where does that take us next? James basically says, and they shouldn't have to keep the law after salvation in order to be fully accepted either. So we're kind of giving a quick overview here. Peter speaks to that one, and James speaks to this one. Right? So far, so good? Okay. I'm trying to keep, balance that line here between boring you by telling you what you already know and making sure you're with me. So please nod or say yes or say let's go on, All right. Okay. So the question now then becomes, okay, where are we? What are we going to do? If the law isn't necessary for those things, then what are we supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? And that's where we go next. So now we're going to get into this already not yet kind of discussion, and this whole discussion gets a little bit more abstract, and I hope it made sense to you. How did James know which of the things from the Old Testament passages of Amos, Isaiah, and Jeremiah had come true at the time of the council? How did you answer number 6? How did he know which things had come true? It's not a real complicated answer. Yeah, God had sent the precedent, the miracle through Cornelius, right? So he said, well, evidently the Gentiles are coming as Gentiles. And he also knew that his brother had come, right? His half-brother. Remember, that's who this James is. Again, I hope you caught my poor attempt at humor about the sandbox stuff in question number 11. But that still boggles my mind about what it must have been like, or how easy it must have been for James to end the conversation. Who did family devotions in your house? Huh. God did them in mine. There you go. Okay. What are you going to say to that? Nothing you can say. No competing with that. Yeah. The Old Testament promises say that when Messiah comes and rules on David's throne over Israel and the world, the Gentiles will come streaming to worship God. Right? This is what the prophecies look forward to. It's what he quotes there from Amos 9 and Jeremiah and Isaiah. And he simply looked at the scriptures and matched them up with the miracles God had just done. Namely, they were two. Right? Number one, his brother, let me put this over so everybody can see it easily. His brother had at least already shown up on the scene and atoned for sin. This is a major part of, obviously, of Jesus coming, and everyone knew that. Number two, God had miraculously fully blessed Gentiles through Peter, signaled by the tongues in Acts. But, here's the problem. He was also painfully aware that his brother was not yet sitting on David's throne, that is, ruling from the earth, making important political decisions. Because I hope you got a sense for how difficult this political decision must have been, right? The whole council gets together. This is a big issue. Are these Gentiles really equal with us? And so they're already taking some heat from, putting their faith in Jesus Messiah. And now this whole Gentile thing is like, oh my goodness, this is the worst political nightmare you could have. And Peter doesn't even take the lead on this thing, right? You'd think he'd be the one, and James is the one that everybody looks up to because of, the family devotions thing, okay? And so James is sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I got to make a decision on this. And where is my brother when you need him, right? He should be sitting on David's throne. He should be making this decision, but he's not here. So he's painfully aware that this is not that this is not yet happening. So this is where we get the already not yet part, right? You guys familiar with this from New Testament? Right? We find ourselves in this strange new age where already some of these messianic blessings are happening now, but not yet all of them. And obviously this is one that is not yet happening. So, just a quick reminder of David's tent. This is again where the essence of Amos chapter 9. It's that whole thing of David's tent, or a house, or a dynasty is another way to say it. It's just a metaphor. That when David's tent is up, it means David's sons are reigning on the throne. In 586 BC, the tent falls down, the house falls down, the house of David is no longer doing what the house of David is supposed to do, ruling on the throne. But the message in Amos chapter 9 is that at some point in time, the son of David will reign, sit on the throne, and his dynasty will be reestablished. And that's the part that has kind of happened, but not yet. Well, because that son of David came and died, but then he didn't stay and sit on the throne. Okay? So here's just a little bit of how I want to help you understand the feeling that everybody had here. How many of you grew up in homes, or at least in churches, where you were familiar with teachings about 7-year tribulation and a rapture coming before? Yes? No? There are others of you that's totally foreign. If you grew up in a Methodist church or a Presbyterian church or something, you may not know about that. That's okay. But for right now, let's just assume that's the situation, right? So those of us who grew up in those kind of households can tell you that was always a little bit of a scary thing, because every time we would come home and you'd look for everybody else in the house and they were gone. Oh no, oh no. And the worst thing, the absolute worst thing, is to find a hoodie laying over the back of a chair. It's like, oh gosh, they closed it there and they're gone. I've been left behind, right? This is horrible. So you think about these things and you worry about them because you're counting on them, and then you say, oh, I got left behind, okay? So take that same scenario and the fear that many of us experienced 15 times or more when we were kids growing up. And imagine this, okay? Imagine today that you have incontrovertible evidence that the 7-year tribulation has started, right? Whether you believe it or not, you believe in it now just for the purposes of this. The Antichrist is on the warpath, and the rapture has not happened. There was no rapture before the tribulation, and all of a sudden we're in it, and we talked about it and thought, okay, we won't be here, but now it looks like we are. What do you do next? What you're going to do is you're going to go back to the Bible and say, hey, let's go back to that teaching. What did we miss? Right? Is there something else we missed here? And you say, I never expected to be in this spot, so I'm going to go back and study my Bible a whole lot more carefully and figure out if I'm, what I'm missing now. Right? So if you can understand that, that's exactly where these guys are. Let's go back here. The timetable isn't happening the way I thought it was. I don't know what's happening. James and Council are very, very, very confused. That's why everybody has to get together and figure this stuff out. It's like, oh my goodness, we got to get together. What's going on, right?
Why do you think that James was the one in charge? I mean, he was the son of a carpenter and married. So how would he have gotten would he have gotten formal training to actually read the Bible? Was a carpenter, were they wealthy enough to actually send him for schooling?
No, but again, he wasn't that much different than the alternative, which was a fisherman. Right? And again, I was being a little facetious about that, but I really think that's part of it, that he grows up with Jesus, right? So when Jesus ain't there and you're really wishing he was, what do? You go back to the people who at least grew up with him, who figure maybe this guy has really good insight. And James does get saved, and by the time we are here now, we are 16 years after the resurrection. So over those 16 years, obviously James has gotten saved and has put to use and in practice and in his life all the lessons that he had learned growing up. And so I think he just naturally has the gravitas of a guy who knows God in multiple ways, right? Not only physically, personally, but spiritually. And so yeah, he just is one of the elders who rises to the top here. Yeah, it's my best guess. So here's what we've got, right? So this is how, up to this point, I'm speaking we as Old Testament Jewish people, were trained to think about the future. There was always this age and the age to come. And this age, before Jesus, Gentiles come, but they come as Jews. They have to become Jews to really get first class. In the age to come, Israel's blessed and Gentiles will stream to Zion as Gentiles. And there are lots and lots of passages in Isaiah and Jeremiah that talk about that, about how the Gentiles will come up to Jerusalem and say, teach us the law. Right? So here's the problem. This age now and this age to come where Jesus rules on David's throne, they're very, very much aware that he came, but he left, and this age has to get pushed off because we're waiting for him to come back to rule on David's throne. So we know that's in the future, but strangely, and this is the wacky time travel part, we can see that Jesus came and went, but we can also see that Gentiles are streaming to God as Gentiles right now. This is the really confusing part. So not all of the stuff that's up here has come true yet, but some of it actually has. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, where are we in the timeline? And so this is why they say, okay, let's just let them be Gentiles as Gentiles, because it feels like that's where we are. We never guessed we were going to be here, but it looks like that's where we are, this unforeseen age. And I just couldn't help myself. I was thinking of another way to show this, so I've got a really cool animated one here, okay? This is going to make you happy inside. Just listen. Okay. So we got this age, and the Messiah comes, and the age to come. This was what everyone knew. Jesus comes, but then he leaves, and he says he's coming back. The angel says he's coming back. So obviously, it's red, right? We have to push this age to come off to there, and then we got this really strange age right now. So where are we? Well, it kind of looks like we're in France, doesn't it? Maybe that's where they think they are. But they're not in France. Where are they? Well, they're in this really strange age. How blue is it and how red is it? Yes. It's partly blue and partly, yes, exactly, right? That's exactly where we are. So we've got some of the already some of this redness is here. That is the Spirit and Gentiles, right? But not yet. We've got some other things from the old that are not here, and mainly poor James is having to make the decision instead of his brother. Okay. So this is the stuff that just now dawns on them. And I think this next slide explains a little bit why. Well, no, it doesn't. But I guess I'll just say it right now. It's going to show up in the slide in a minute. But I think there's this, when you take a look at Acts chapter 1. No, I don't have it on the screen. You take a look at Acts chapter 1. It's really a very funny chapter if you've thought about it. Because in Acts chapter 1, verse 6, they all go out to the Mount of Olives just east of Jerusalem. And he gets ready to go up into heaven. And the disciples say, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Because that's the burning thing on their mind, right? In Acts chapter 1, verses 2 and 3 says, for 40 days, Jesus taught about the kingdom. And so they're expecting it, and their question to him is, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? And guess what Jesus' answer is? He just gives them Acts 1:8. Don't worry about that, but you will be my, it's not for you to know the times and the seasons which the Father has put in his own power. But you should be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and the uttermost parts of the earth. And then he ascends up into heaven. And if you had been there and I had been there, I'm pretty sure the disciples looked at each other and say, he didn't answer the question. Wait, come back. Right? You didn't answer. What are you? The kingdom now? And bye. See you later. And so they're just like, oh no. And that's why the angel probably comes along and says, come on, you guys, why are you standing there staring up into heaven? They say, because he didn't answer the question. Is he going to answer the question? And the angel says, well, that's not for you to know, but he will come back in the same way he took off. But when? So again, if you were at that point, what would you be thinking? Well, maybe it's next week. You know, because he does say, go into the city and power will come upon you. Oh, that's what that means. We go back into the city, and not many days from now, the power will come on. The power will come down from heaven, and he will reign. Well, no, there's power coming down from heaven, but it's in the person of the Spirit, not Jesus. And so it's not what they were expecting, not what they were hoping for. And so now here we are 16 years later, they're probably still thinking it's got to be now, doesn't it? Doesn't it have to be now? And so they say, well, gosh, it hasn't happened yet, so I guess we will just do this. And that whole dynamic, I think, is fascinating, where Jesus does not answer the question. And he doesn't answer the question anywhere else. And so here, You would think that all these apostles and James would have some sort of hotline to heaven and could say, Jesus, what should we do? And what does Jesus say? He doesn't answer it. He says, why don't you get a council together and figure it out? And that's exactly what they do. So I think there's a big teaching there about how we as the church are supposed to function, searching the Scriptures daily, seeing what God has done, trying to follow His will, without getting some sort of direct revelation or depending upon that, thinking, God, would you please just whisper the answer to us quickly? God says, no, I want you to figure this thing out. And so that's what they do. All right? All right, let's keep going. A couple more quick questions here. Did the God-fearing Gentile believers already keep the decrees of the council? Yeah, they pretty much did, right? They were like Cornelius, very nice Gentile. Notice I had to work really hard in PowerPoint to make that happen. I hope you appreciate that. Small g, Gentile boys. So why is there such a big blow up now? Because you might say, haven't we settled all this with the story of Cornelius? Because in effect we have, right? But there's a reason. Why do we have to go back to it now? Clark, why do we have to go back to it now? Because you know the answer to this, because you took a whole course about it. Oh, it would spoil it. Which is a really good cover-up to say, I can't remember the answer right now, Dr. Moore. Yes. Why is there such a big blow-up now? Why doesn't the story of Cornelius answer this situation right here? What has happened that's caused people to rethink this issue and say, is that really the right thing to do?
Does that have to do with the fact there are more, like this opens up the gate for way more Gentiles?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because what's happened here is chapters 13 and 14. And in Acts, chapters 13 and 14 is the big first missionary journey. It's the story of the missionary journey of Paul to the area of Galatia, okay? And what's going to happen is this, because in the first missionary journey, lots of capital G Gentile boys get saved. All right, now, let this sink in for a second. I'm about to show you another chart that's going to change your life, and you should remember forever, okay? We've got this chart you saw before, where first-class Israelites and proselytes, namely Nicholas, right? So I kind of want you to keep that name in your head representing a class of individuals, like proselytes, Nicholas, that's who that is. And then we saw the God-fearer, Cornelius, small g, Gentile boy, right, in Acts chapter 10. And again, pardon me if I put this in racial terms, but that is exactly what it is. This is racism and racial terms and God putting the nations back together. So there were an awful lot of Jewish people who were kind of nervous about Cornelius because he's a Gentile boy. He's a really nice Gentile boy, but he's still kind of Gentile. Okay, we can let him in. And then the whole thing breaks down, because what we're going to have here in the first missionary journey is why the decision has to be revisited is because of this. That's Butch, okay, right here. This is the guy, right? This is the guy. You know who Butch is. He's one of those guys who smells like bacon, right? And he comes into the church, and now the question is, seriously? I mean, Butch belongs up here with us? Now, again, I hope this doesn't sound too racist, but that's exactly what's going on here. You can imagine the Jewish fathers, right, who were really nervous about Cornelius, but now Butch comes in. It's like, oh, my goodness, I knew if you let Cornelius in, this would happen too. And these guys, they come, and they smell like bacon, and they can't keep their, they don't have their pants on tight, their pants hang down, and the music they listen to, and, they're not dating my daughter. Right? That's really kind of where we are. And so all of a sudden, there's this big council that says, oh my goodness, is this really the right thing to do? So that's where we find ourselves here. What exactly is the relationship of these Gentiles to the law? If they don't keep the law, all hell's going to break loose, and the morality level is going to fall down, and God's people is going to be compromised and all that sort of stuff, right? And you have to realize here that even though we talk about racism and we realize that's a really bad thing and God is putting the whole world back together, sometimes we get too excited about Americanism, right? And we all at least realize in our head that's a really stupid thing to let divide. But with these people, they could at least have some sense of this is a divinely established culture. And you're messing with the divinely established culture. So are you sure we should just lower the standards here? Luke? excuse me, I think it was pretty big news because up in Antioch, as we're going to find out, the people in Antioch were certainly much more open to this kind of thing than others, and the message had gone out. So, is there another answer from Galatians? You know what? Here's a better answer about that. We're going to find out in Galatians 2, 1-10, that that this whole story of Titus not being circumcised was a fairly private thing. So maybe the answer is that maybe it was known in some circles, but was one of those rumors on the fringe and wasn't real well known. Although people would know in Jerusalem. The people, I take that back, because in Acts chapter 11, there was a small council there that knew. So, gosh, I don't know how to answer your question. It's hard to know exactly what everybody else did know about that. Yeah, I think he's reviewing it, and James even mentions it, what Peter says. So I think the people who were informed must have known about that. Because, again, Acts 11, there is a certain council there. I don't like to call it the Jerusalem Council, so you don't get mixed up with this. But there was a small council there that convened too. Yeah. Okay, so Nicholas, Cornelius, and Butch. Now you got that all in your vocabulary, all right? So let's go on then. Why did James and the council select these 4 commands? Answer? Yeah, they were already required, right? So these 4 commands decreed not only for Jews, but also for the alien who sojourns among you. That is, let me define it for you here. One who, by faith, has chosen to be with you on the journey, right? So the alien who sojourns among you, I know that phrase gets hijacked a lot in immigration discussions. It probably shouldn't be, because this isn't just talking just about people coming into your borders. This is talking about people who were sympathetic toward the Jewish religion, towards the God of Israel, who came deliberately, not just because they were looking for a better country, because Israel wasn't that great a country, but because they wanted to be close to God. But they were still Gentiles, okay? So when we're going through some of the hairier parts of the law, Leviticus 17 and 18, it says, for these 4 things, idolatry, drinking blood and eating things strangled, and for immorality, these are things that are so essential that you make sure you don't do them. And these, as opposed to all the other stuff in Leviticus 1-16, these things in 17 and 18 apply even to the alien who sojourns among you. Right? So I don't know if you went back and looked at it or not, but I think we can kind of see it here. Oh, maybe we can see it here. See how our technology works for us. Yeah. See, my Bible's open to Leviticus 17 and 18, and you see the verse here, verse 10. Any Israelite or any alien living among them, and then up here, any alien living among them, and then it's at the end of chapter 18, right? So those 4 things are what conscientious Gentiles living in Israel had always been required to do anyway. Right? Good? Does that make sense? All right. So, Gentiles are now fully accepted while still Gentiles, while no other demands are placed on them other than what has always been, for 1,500 years, been placed on them. So the question of becoming a proselyte is now off the table, but that doesn't mean that these 4 things don't still remain on them. So the question is, what do we do with them? The answer is, let's do with them what we've always been doing with them. Just let them keep those things, but now they're still first class and don't have to get circumcised.
Those 4 commands are placed upon the Gentiles in this time. Like, as I'm looking back at my own upbringing, I don't recall being told to abstain from meat that had been strangled. So how do the commands that were given to the Gentiles at this time relate to us now?
Really good question. That is such a good question. I'm not going to answer it. We're going to make everybody else answer it. Did you guys hear his question? When he grew up, he went to an unholy church that ate blood. Okay, he didn't say it quite like that. But nobody ever told him to eat kosher sausage. And that's the difference. Kosher sausage is sausage that has been slaughtered properly and the blood drained out of it properly and specially. And so it fits the commands of Leviticus of not eating blood to some sort of excess, right? Unless your sausage is kosher and that kind of care wasn't taken with it, you probably violated this command. Now, the stuff in chapter 18 about the sexual stuff is really so weird and strange. I'm pretty sure you haven't done that, right? You haven't slept with your uncle's neighbor's wife or whatever is in there. But if you look at that chapter 18, it's really kind of like they did this. But anyway, his question again goes back to Acts 15. Come on, you guys are smart. Yeah, Sean?
In Hebrews, wasn't all that stuff done away with?
Yeah. Yeah. In my mind, Hebrews, that stuff's done away with. Hebrews is kind of the answer to that. Now, again, that's to some of the more ceremonial aspects of it, like with the food. Obviously, in chapter 18, the sexual stuff, there are other rules about, not being involved in sexual immorality. But that ceremonial law, I think, is gone, so we don't have to worry about it. Otherwise, if it weren't for Hebrews, I think you would have to worry about Acts 15. Right? We all on the same page?
So then, I think it's 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about the meat sacrificed to idols, and he says, like, well, some people think you should, and some people think you shouldn't. It kind of sounds like James was saying that you shouldn't, and that 1 Corinthians was before Hebrews, right?
Yeah, but keep in mind, that's a whole different issue because that's not a kosher issue. It's a completely different issue. It's about food, but it's a different thing of food. It is kosher meat that has been placed in the service of an idol. Has it been contaminated by the idolatry, and should you not be connected with it? And Paul says, well, a demon is not really real, has no power over me, so I can't eat that. But it is a whole different issue. It's not about the kosher, non-kosher thing. It's, again, just a different issue of the closeness with which it's connected with demons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what does it mean in Acts 15 when he says,
Idolatry.
okay, so
It means don't be involved in idolatry. Yeah, don't be involved in idolatry. The parallel case would be you actually go to the pagan temple and offer the meat yourself. Don't do that. But if somebody else goes and offers the meat, and then the guy at the temple takes it and sells it out the back door to the market, which is what they would do, then you can buy that meat. Because you didn't go worship the demon in the first place. That's what the 1 Corinthians 9 thing is about. Okay, there are a couple more things I want to say about this. So in the end, Gentiles must only keep the part of the law they've always been asked to keep. The law is not necessary for full admission. So then, you tell me this. Tell me what happens here. We are at the very end of the Jerusalem conference, Jerusalem Council, okay? James has prayed to conclude everything. Everyone says, oh, that's great. We can all go home. And you look into the concert hall where the whole conference has been held, and you see there's one guy sitting there in this very pensive mood, this weird look on his face. And it's Nicholas. And you think to yourself, now why is Nicholas so perturbed about all this? And then you think to yourself and you realize, oh, you know what I'm going here? What's Nicholas thinking? Man, if I just waited. Could have had, oh my word, yeah, that's probably what Nicholas is thinking. Okay, just so you know, just here with me. All right. Now, I seriously doubt he was thinking that, but anyway, maybe. All right? In your own words, can you explain why believing people in AD 49 are having such a difficult time? And I say the answer should have the phrase, this age and age to come in it. We've already been over that, I think. That's probably a redundant question. The answer is, we don't know what time we're in, right? Messiah had come once, but not twice. They didn't know what Old Testament prophecies were fulfilled and which weren't. And they were time travelers. They really were time travelers and didn't know where they were in eschatological time. We didn't expect to be here. We never expected Messiah would come once, but not twice. We thought all that stuff about Messiah would happen, boom, when he set up the kingdom. Right? So, I don't know if I want to talk about Timothy right now or not. Did you guys Did Timothy make sense to you as you read through that discussion? When you ask about what makes a person a Jew, is it their mom or their dad? And you know that's not an answer, not a question answered by the Bible. That's a question answered by Jewish custom, which changes over time. And so at one point in the first century, it was a dad, and by the second century, it was a mom. So right here in the middle, the question is Timothy Jewish or is he not? No one could really say. Certainly he had not been circumcised 8 days old, right? So let me just hit this really quickly. Why would Paul circumcise Timothy but be so adamant against Titus, which is in chapter 2 of Galatians? Because his nationality was really up in the air. Is Paul's attitude, well, hey, if you're lucky enough to have a chance to make a choice about being Jewish or not, then choose freedom and be a Gentile? Is that his attitude? And I think the answer is no, that's not his attitude. He circumcised them because of the Jews. Not that he wouldn't have circumcised them if they hadn't been there, but especially to demonstrate to them his love of Israel and the blessing of being Jewish, Paul circumcises Timothy. Now, I don't know if that makes sense to you. But when you see that because of, you think, oh, no, that's the only reason. No. What if I say it like this? What if I say, I hug my wife because of the children? Now, it could be that I'm a really lame husband and don't really love my wife, and they're my only excuse, like I don't really love her. But let's assume something better, right, that I really do love her, and that it is also for this reason. For the kids' benefit, that I make it obvious. Kids need to know I love their mom, and so I make it a point to be affectionate with my wife in front of the kids so they know, yeah, Dad really loves Mom, right? Not as though I wouldn't do it if they weren't there, but I want them to see this. And Paul says, hey, this would be a really good opportunity for them to understand this distinction because we're not doing Gentiles, but we certainly are still eager to have Jewish kids be Jewish. And again, this goes right back to that whole discussion in Acts 21. In Acts 21, we've heard it said about you that you tell our people not to circumcise their children. Is that true? And that's why Paul can say, no, it is not true. And here's Exhibit A, I think, which is part of the reason why Luke includes it, right, in Acts to demonstrate it's true that Timothy was circumcised. So Timothy will also keep the other points of laws, food, Sabbath, and sacrifices when in Jerusalem. So with that, are we finished with this? Number 11, bonus. By what authority does James do this? I think we've actually kind of just talked about that with Ryan. He doesn't have any actually authority to actually make this pronounce it. He's just working off of the miracle of Cornelius and the miracle of his brother in the scriptures and saying, sure looks to me like this is what God is doing. So he's not just proclaiming a decision because he's an apostle, because he's not. So he does that. All right, so if this were a test, you would have 10 points by now, maybe, if you got the bonus right. But how many letters are in Dr. Miller's middle name? Does anybody want to take their... Would you like to stake your grade for the day on this, Miguel? You ready for it? Is it Alexander with 9 letters? You're really willing to stake your grade for today on this? Yeah, you fail. You lost. It is not Alexander with 9 letters. No. Anybody else know how? I told you the questions would get harder. How many letters? Just going for it. Anthony with 7. Really good guess, not right. You want to try your other guess? Yeah, no, that's not right either. Alan? Adam with 4? That is not my middle name, but 4 is the right number. Alan with 4, yeah, A-L-A-N. Did you have that, Dahlia? I was just trying to see how, did you have that? How did you guess? You just guessed? It's better be lucky than good. Yep, that's right. Yeah, I just want to see how good your research skills were. And Dahlia told me that she found out I went to high school in Warren Central, and yeah, that's good. It's kind of creepy. It's kind of creepy. What else do you know about me? I don't know. All right, so we got a couple of minutes left. Here, what we're going to do next time is we're just going to read over that 5 pages on Acts 21, which you've almost been over by now, so it's kind of perfunctory. And then we're going to get started in Galatians and doing some of this, the geography and the maps. So you don't have to these actually are for next time, so make sure you bring them back. We're going to work through them and see it. So leftover questions right now then. What's still kind of bugging you or you have a question about? Luke? Yeah, what's a good way to apply Old Testament law to today? A lot of it has to do with really deeply understanding what the original teaching really was. Right? So even the silly stuff like don't plant 2 different kinds of seed in a field, you need to go back and figure out what that meant, right? And a lot of it had to do with the Jewish people learning discernment and separating good from evil, right? So I might plant different kinds of seed in my field today, because I'm not bound by that, but I'm aware of the principle to separate good from evil and not to let compromises happen in my life and my thought life and everything else. So I'm going to go back and see what it really meant and see if that meaning is transferable to today. And I'm still not going to eat blood, again, not just because it's gooey or icky, but because blood has this special place in the atonement system, a special meaning, you know. Yeah, I guess it's not just a science; it's also an art of trying to figure out how to do that, and figure out what does this teach me about God, and how is that transferable to me. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand this. So, is their attitude still at this point that if Gentiles don't have to be circumcised and they don't have to follow the whole law, but if they're really serious about it, they would?
You mean if they're real serious about it, would they become Nicholas? And I think the answer is no. I don't think so. I think they're saying if they're really serious about it, they're going to keep these 4 things. Everybody ought to do that, but we don't want them to become a Nicholas. And in fact, in Galatians, Paul is going to get really adamant about not being a Nicholas. And what he's going to say is, if you think there is any advantage for you in becoming Nicholas now, you're not putting Christ where you ought to, and you're fallen from grace. Because Timothy was Jewish. And so it's for Gentiles, he's saying, don't you dare do this, while on the other hand, I do it. And if you take it takes you a while to get your head around that game, but once you realize, oh, there's consistency there, right, in this very time period. But you can understand why these rumors fly around in the ancient world and in the modern world about what's going on here, and that's why he has to clarify things in Acts 21. Yeah. Yeah, good. And thanks for that question. That's good. I'm glad for those kind of clarifying questions. Nancy?
So here's a real life situation in China. They worship ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
There's food provided for ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And then normally they'll share food sometimes. So out of what reason should I say no or say yes? Because I'm thinking about Paul says somewhere in Romans or in other places like you are not eating it with
Yeah, that would, well, we will talk about that in Romans 14 and 15 a lot, but again, I think that's more the 1 Corinthians 9 thing where Paul says this, and I will talk to you about 1 Corinthians 9 next time, because that comes up all the time. To the Jews, I became a Jew, which makes it sound like he's not a Jew. And to the Gentiles, I became like one without the law, which makes it seem like he's wishy-washy. But I'll walk you through that next time, 1 Corinthians 9. And just say that's where Paul says that is a matter of conscience. If you can handle it, you can do that, but don't make anybody else stumble. But it's different than the kosher food. But your example is that example of the food offered to ancestors is very close to 1 Corinthians 9, and a very good example of that.